We're going to do something a little different today. I usually talk about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, living in the United States, getting by in the United States, but it looks as though events have changed significantly. Might be into another war, and it's good to be informed about all of that. So I'm going to talk about what's going on. Old Marine Corps sergeant here, so we'll talk about that as well. And I will, you know, we just might have to spend another few $1 trillion. We spent what, $2 or $3 trillion over the lifetime of the war in Iraq, a few $1 trillion in Afghanistan. That's not only the war itself, but all the VA claims, all of the deaths, all of the disabled people, that veterans that came back from those wars that will still having to pay for those wars. So if we get into this again, that's another couple of $1 trillion possibly. So we're going to talk about that, the motivations, why we're in there, what's going on in Iran. Most people see information from the same sources, so we wanted to mix it up a little bit here. So we are going to watch some videos here, and I am going to also answer as many questions. We'll pop up your all's questions. Not too much to discuss. We have a criminals, okay? So yeah, if you have any personal opinions, any questions you have about all of this, please make sure you type them into the chat, and we'll get to them as long as we possibly can. Edward says, Scott Ritter says it takes about 4 Patriot missiles to knock out 1 Soviet missile over Ukraine. I wonder how many Israel is using and how much they cost. Yeah, it's interesting that I guess Israeli intelligence said Iran only has 2 or 3 ballistic missiles, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, wait a second, we were wrong by a factor of 10. They might have 20 or 30,000. So I'm not sure whether they always knew that, and they were always, playing it to, start the war, whatever the case may be. But we're going to get into all that today. A lot of people don't know a little bit of the history of Iran, the relationship between Israel and Iran and Saudi Arabia, and the Shah of Iran and the Ayatollahs. And so we're going to get into all of that today. So what we have here is Operation Midnight Hammer is what they're calling it. A couple of B-2 stealth bombers attacked what we allege. And for those young people out there under 30 years old, I want to show you a picture. That little vial right there cost us a couple of $1 trillion, thousands of U.S. lives. That little vial, that was what, 22 years ago? It was in February, 2003, and that was Colin Powell at the United Nations, weapons of mass destruction, Iraq, 1 letter off, Iraq, Iran. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Here's the proof, yellow cake vial, that they have weapons of mass destruction. So therefore, we need to invade the country, regime change, all the rest of it. And within a month after that, we invaded Iraq. And yeah, didn't go so well. And the country is extremely unstable right now and anticipated being unstable for a long time. So for those young people out there, it's I guess this is a sequel. Weapons of mass destruction, Iraq, now it's Iran. All right, so let's watch some footage of the Secretary of Defense, former Fox News host, who's in charge, I guess, of a lot of this now, and we'll see what he has to say.
Bombing firepower.
We devastated the Iranian nuclear program.
14 massive ordnance penetrator bombs known as MOPS or bunker busters were used, as well as Tomahawk missiles fired from US submarines at 3 Iranian nuclear sites, Isfahan, Natanz and Fordo. Assessments are still being made on the damage inflicted.
Initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Donald Trump gave the go-ahead when he believed negotiations with the Iranians over a new nuclear deal were going nowhere. The president announced the operation had been carried out in a nationwide television address late on Saturday night. He'd promised a final decision on joining the Israeli war in Iran within 2 weeks. It came in just 2 days.
Could you imagine if this was Biden or Harris that was in the same situation? That was Biden or Harris standing there saying, we just attacked? Could you imagine what Trump would do in Truth Social and X and Twitter? And he would go, all his big, rallies, he would say, oh, if I was there, I would have negotiated that in 5 minutes. That was such an easy negotiation. These people are terrible at negotiations. Why didn't they just negotiate? And I would have, if I was there, I would.
And saying it was not open-ended, but warning the Iranians to negotiate.
There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left.
Vice President J.D. Vance says this is not an attack on the Iranian people and not about regime change, and rejected the idea Trump broke the law taking this action.
Not about regime change, but he just put out a Truth Social post today. Make Iran great again. He said it's not about a regime change, but if the Iranian people want to make Iran great again, then yeah, they need to, change the regime.
The idea that this was outside of presidential authority, I think any real serious legal person would tell you that's not true. I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives.
Donald Trump.
Do we need to say anything about that? Okay, the reason Iraq was a fiasco, the reason Afghanistan was a fiasco is because of the leaders at that particular time, but Trump can fix everything. Wow. Vance has a lot of, this is BS. Wearing that MAGA campaign hat in the Situation Room shows a lot. Yeah, regime change. I mean, this is this goes back, goes back thousands of years. When you take over a country, whether it's your own country or another country, the first thing you do is you divide and conquer. So they did that with Iraq. We went in there in deep Baathification. All the people that supported Saddam Hussein, we attacked them and put in kind of the second tier. But the highest level people, the elite, were for whatever purposes, that was the regime at that time. If they wanted to do be in charge of a police department or be in charge of the water supply, those are the best people at that particular time. In order to be that, they had to join the Ba'ath Party. So they were still the elite and the best people available for the time. And then when you go in there and you say, okay, the previous regime and everybody involved in the previous regime, this goes back to, the 1949 taking over the Communist Party, taking over the Nationalists for Chiang Kai-shek, and goes all the way back. Then you kind of bring in the second teamers, the second streamers, and kind of, I guess, compared to Trump's first term, and he, hired a lot of, great people. They immediately got fired, and this time he says, well, I'm going to just, whoever agrees with me, that's who's going to get the job. If they kowtow on a 100% basis, then they will get the job. If not, then we'll find somebody else.
Is facing allegations that he breached the Constitution because only Congress can declare war. In both chambers on the Hill on Monday, resolutions will be filed calling for no further escalation or conflict. But Donald Trump's biggest battle may well be convincing people who voted for him that the man who argued against stupid Middle East wars is not about to be dragged into another.
That's the issue. What happens next? So we have, America, we, beat our chest and we talk about our military is the greatest military in the world, which it is. Technology, shock and awe. So we go in there and we do this, thing. It's easy, superiority, B-2 bombers, stealth. Bunker busters, the only country in the world that can do this. We're the only country in the world that can do this. So yay, America. Okay, so what's next? Why don't the Iranians trust us? This goes all the way back to basically 1953. In 1953, the Iranians, so this is a Bev, the more what's going on in Iran that we know, yes. So in 1953, there was essentially a coup led by the British and the American CIA. In the United States, the guy that led this was a guy named Kermit Roosevelt. So number one, Kermit, but he was the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, a Roosevelt. And he and the CIA and British intelligence saw that Iran just decided to go down the democratic road. They had the Shah of Iran, the king of Iran, who took over from his father. His father was really terrible. The Shah of Iran took over, but the people say, you know what? We don't want kings anymore. We don't want royalty. We want a democracy. Perfect. Awesome. So they voted in this guy, Mossadegh. Mossadegh says, Iran is a very, very rich country. We're a phenomenally rich country, but our people are very, very poor. They've been poor for decades, centuries. Why are we such a rich country, but our people are poor? Well, it's because Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, now called British Petroleum, owns it all. So we are going to nationalize oil. Oh, that's it. Yeah, you can nationalize oil. That's it. You're done. So the CIA, British intelligence, Kermit Roosevelt, United States under Eisenhower decided to go in there and kick out the democratically. If we hadn't done that, then, this possibly may have never happened. They kick out the democratically elected leader of the country and reinstall the Shah of Iran. So he becomes the Shah again basically the king from 1953 up until 1979. And he's not good. He's, if you're rich and supporter, then it's very good. But if you're not, then not so much. Very, very heavy police state, very restricted. And as we all know, or hopefully most of us know, in 1979, there was the Islamic Revolution. Ayatollah Khomeini, he was actually in exile in Iraq, Paris, and he was the first, Glenn Beck. He was a right-wing radio personality. He used to record videos in Paris and Iraq where he was in exile and talk crap about, the Shah of Iran. And then those recordings were broadcast in Iran. And people started following him. They hated the Shah, the terrible situation, the police state essentially, and the Ayatollah Khomeini came back and they kicked out the Shah of Iran. The Shah of Iran also at this time had cancer. And he was pretty much in exile and he was looking for cancer treatment. So he went to New York for cancer treatment. And the Iranian people says, really? For cancer treatment? Or is he going there to meet Kermit Roosevelt? Or Roosevelt's not around at the time, but the CIA is the Shah of Iran sitting in a cafe in New York with the CIA and British intelligence planning to take over the Iranian government again like they did several years ago. So that's when, as we all know, they took over the hostages. So was it Walter Cronkite every day? I don't know if you all remember Walter Cronkite at the end of every broadcast. You just say, the 175th day of the hostages in Iran, there was 52 they gave back, 52 hostages that were taken out of the U.S. Embassy and for 444 days. All right. And the hostages were taken because Iran said, well, if we take hostages, maybe then, that'll, stop, the CIA and British intelligence from trying to take over the government again. So, and one of the interesting little side notes on that is at the U.S. Embassy. Little side note. At the U.S. Embassy, they said, okay, hey, you know, we're being attacked. It was by students. The Ayatollah Khomeini didn't support at first the takeover of the U.S. Embassy. He did later, but at first he didn't. It was basically U.S. It was college. It was Iranian college students that took over, climbed over the walls, and the American embassy guys said, okay, we need to destroy all evidence of all the bad stuff we're doing. So they put all the paper and everything, and they put it in the shredder. Shredders at that time only cut one way. So you had all these big mountains of sliced up paper. And what is one thing Iran is world famous for? What's the name of Iran before it was Iran? Iran changed its name. The country changed its name about 100 years ago now. It was known at another name for thousands of years. Persia. Persian rugs. So what they did is they went out, the Iranian government there at the time, the new government, they went out to little old ladies that had been putting together Persian rugs, you know, for centuries, you know, their families. And they brought those people in the American embassy and they said, hey, slice all this together. You've been putting rugs together, put all this together. So they put all that together and rebuilt it. So that's when they invented cross-cut shredders. It was because of, that. Anyway, so why doesn't the Iranians trust us? Because of that. We were instrumental in throwing over their democratically elected leader. And when Obama negotiated the Iran nuclear deal, they were following the protocols and everything. And then in 2018, when Trump came in, he threw it all out. And the Iranians said, wait a second, we were following everything. See, we can't trust you. We're going to do a deal. And then, you know, a new administration comes in, y'all just throw it out. So that is some of the background to all of this. Why does, Israel and Iran, obviously, you know, Iran in terms of Palestine and, you know, Gaza and all that, you know, that's the animosity there. Iran supports Hezbollah out of Lebanon, Hamas out of the Gaza Strip, the Houthis, I always pronounce it incorrectly, Houthis in Yemen. So you've got animosity there between Israel and Iran. You've got animosity there between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Iran is a Shiite, so there's about 95% of the world's Muslims are Sunni, you know, in Saudi Arabia and other countries, Indonesia, India. About 5% or so are Shia, predominantly in Iran. It's originally, historically, it was more of a political type thing. It later became kind of a religious, cultural difference between Shia and Sunni. So Saudi Arabia doesn't like Iran. So they have always kind of under their breath wanted, you know, Iran's regime change. And obviously Israel wants regime change. And the U.S., we support Israel. Another story. Benjamin Netanyahu. Famous story is when he came to the United States many years ago. He was good friends with the Kushner family. Jared Kushner, his dad. And when Netanyahu came to the United States to do stuff, one time, several times he stayed at the Kushner home. One time, he stayed in Jared Kushner's boyhood bed. He slept in Jared Kushner's bed. Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, slept in Jared Kushner's bed. And Kushner said, okay, you take the bed, and he slept in the basement. So that's how close Kushner, Trump is to Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. There's also AIPAC, which is American-Israeli political organization, has about 100,000 people, but phenomenal amounts of money, several billionaires on that, so they support Israel. You've got the Christian Zionists, about 7 million people are the Christian Zionists. They support Israel. Ted Cruz, as we recently saw the video, he said he started running for Senate to support Israel. So you've got that support. Saudi Arabia, Jared Kushner, Donald Trump, the first thing they did became when Trump became president, first time, second time was the first place he went to go talk to MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia, the Israel lobby, they have wanted Iran to be taken care of for a long time. So this has been the writing on the wall for, unfortunately, a long time. And who pays for it? As usual, it's always unfortunately, it's the military, and it's the people that have to pay for all this, pay for the wars.
Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, at the White House.
Well, let's go to the White House now and speak to Kimberly Halkett. So they may have been precision-guided missiles, but do we have any more precision from the wording coming from the Trump administration over what exactly they've been able to achieve in Iran?
Well, in terms of achievements, there's been a softening of the accomplishments and language. It is interesting because initially the U.S. president saying that the program had been totally obliterated. Then the Secretary of Defense saying that, in fact, there had been devastation. Now the U.S. president, in a most recent post, not describing damage at all, but instead saying that it was a spectacular military success. But the bottom line in all of this is that there has been no bomb damage assessment, and there's been no evidence that the program in Iran has been destroyed. In fact, we know that just days before the strikes by the United States at the Fordo plant, there is reporting that the enriched uranium had actually been removed was not even on site when the U.S. struck it. As well, there has been no mention of the Bashir nuclear facility, which is operated by the Russians and was not struck by the United States. So by all accounts and all reports, it is still fully operational. So if the mission of the United States was to destroy a path to a nuclear weapon, the United States has offered no evidence of that.
Question, your expertise as a reporting is just why have you changed your format? Because I spent every single day helping people get, the benefits they're eligible for from Social Security. There's 70 million Americans out there that are struggling. They need their Social Security benefits, and that's my mission in life, and in my retirement. But this directly reflects, if we don't get informed, if we don't make our views known, then this is going to escalate. We have what's called the sunken cost. You've got the hubris, and we beat our chest and we did our B-2 bombers and our bunker busters and all this kind of stuff. But if it ends there, then okay-ish. But what happens next? And that's our decision. In order, as we know in Vietnam, it's the famous saying, when they negotiated the end of Vietnam, one of the Vietnam generals said, one of the American generals said to a Vietnam general, the American general says, we never lost a battle in Vietnam. We never lost one single battle in Vietnam. And the Vietnam general's reply was, yeah, you're correct, but you lost the war. Why did you lose the war? Because the Americans were fighting a completely different war. The Vietnamese were fighting, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. They knew the war was on the American streets and the American public. So that's what they did, is they focused on essentially public relations to destroy the willpower of the Americans to continue that war. So through attrition and nightly news and everything. So the Vietnamese destroyed the American will to continue that war. And because we dropped more bombs on Vietnam than we did all countries did during World War II. More bombs in Vietnam than all countries dropped in World War II. But even then, we lost the war. We gave out, or some people say it was a tie, or whatever you want to put it. We lost it. So the willpower of the people, and that's y'all. So if we stop this, If you want to continue it, then I guess that's your prerogative. But if it continues, then it's going to cost us trillions of dollars. And what's going to happen on the domestic home front? Are we going to be focusing on making sure Social Security cuts don't happen in the future? No, we're going to be in a war for type footing for the next 10 years. Are we going to be able to fix it even when we did have the willpower to make sure those cuts? No, we won't have the money. We're already, trillions of dollars, $37 trillion in debt. We're about to give several $1 trillion more to the wealthiest people in America, the wealthiest corporations. And we're about to spend another $2 or $3 trillion. It's amazing, we're able to pop out $2 or $3 trillion when it comes to war, but hey, we get $2 or $3 trillion and we put it in Social Security retirees, Medicare, Medicaid will be good for, for a long, long, long time. But we don't have the money for that. We don't have the money for that. How does anyone know where Jared Kushner sleeps? Oh, it's a famous story. Yeah, Jared Kushner does, and so does his family, and so does Benjamin Netanyahu. He sleeps in his, So that's the famous story that's well documented, that Netanyahu stays with the Kushner family several times when he came to the United States. My brother did 2 tours in Nam. So tell your brother thank you for his service.
And Kimberly, what about the political fallout here? We've had both conservative and progressive lawmakers calling the move a breach of the Constitution. Why is that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's because in the U.S. Constitution, there is a requirement that unless there is some sort of imminent emergency, that the U.S. president must request to Congress that the United States go to war, something that was not done. In fact, the senators and House of Representatives say there were no intelligence briefings ahead of the U.S. mission at all. Now, that is expected to change on Tuesday. We know there will be a briefing supplied to both the House and the Senate, but at the same time, there are concerns that the U.S. president has exceeded his executive authority. He can, as commander-in-chief, he can direct the military, but it is Congress that allows and declares the United States into war. And so members like Thomas Massey, a Republican, have said this is unconstitutional, that the U.S. president's actions may even be illegal. And there are Democrats, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who say this is grounds for impeachment. The bottom line in all of this, the White House defending it, saying the president has not exceeded his powers.
Okay, many thanks.
Yeah, whether he, semantics, war, tomato. Obama, he bombed Libya. Didn't have congressional approval. I think he talked to members of Congress, but we're not 100% sure Trump did or well. But I think that's I think that's a point that shouldn't focus on too much until we actually change, the law. It says, okay, in order to declare war, Congress has the power to declare war. But these type of strikes and stuff like that, we should definitely change the law that says, okay, full out war, Congress, yes, but drop bombs, kill people, destroy, use the military, things like this, and this type of action, Congress as well. So I think it's just the problem of our political system. Yeah, it wasn't. It was a failure. Wasn't destroyed. Yeah, that's going to be the thing going forward. What do y'all think about where does this go? Does it stop now? Because Iran is going to retaliate, and they usually retaliate through proxies. And there's also over 40,000, well, if they don't do it through proxies, either through Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever, or domestically in the United States. And the guy who's in charge of protecting us domestically is like a 22-year-old former landscaper. Yeah, he's in charge of, the president decided to put a 22-year-old kid in charge of Homeland Security and this in preparation. So, anyway, so what's going to happen next? there are about 40,000 U.S. troops. You got U.S. troops in Iraq. You got U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, all throughout the Middle East, and within striking distance, the ballistic missiles that Iran has, and Iran essentially has been building their own ballistic missiles. People, always look to blame. So, oh, it's Russia's fault because, Russia gave them or China gave them ballistic missiles. No. The first ballistic missiles they got were actually from North Korea. That was back in the 60s or so. So they took those and they re-engineered them, and they got some help later by the Chinese, and they got some help later by the Russians, but the Russians kind of denied it. But that was decades ago. So since then, Iran has been building their own ballistic missiles. So, and they have the capacity of about 2,000 or 3,000 miles, and that's within the 40,000 U.S. troops. So hopefully something like that doesn't happen. Yeah. Yes, study this stuff. It's my second life after Social Security and all that. You're playing around with debates and your own opinions. Yep. And you have no real knowledge of military or this conflict. Why are you doing this? Money, access. I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and anti-terrorism, all this. Yeah, this is what military studies. So, and I know the history of Iran. I know the history of the Middle East. So, and I mean, all you have to do is read the paper over the last 30 or 40 years, and we've done this before. And one of the problems with Iran is you need several things. If we're talking about regime change, which Trump is talking about regime change today, you need boots on the ground. We know through Iraq. We know through Afghanistan. You need boots on the ground. You need massive boots on the ground. You can't do it through air superiority. You have to have massive forces on the ground. And so to take over, you need three things. You need massive boots on the ground, and you can't really be encircled. But if you go into a country like Iran, that's one of the problems. Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam is, we were behind enemy lines. Like the old, famous Band of Brothers. It's like, you're behind enemy lines. Yeah, we're paratroopers. We're supposed to be behind, enemy lines. But everybody else, not necessarily so, particularly when you can't tell the so-called enemy. It's an ideological warfare, right? So you're going to be encircled. And supply lines. Those people, the boots on around the ground, need to be resupplied. The problem with Iran, the most difficult that people have learned for thousands of years, is Iran has, like the United States, only different, is one of the most effective defensive structures in the world. The United States, we have the most impressive defensive structure in the world, is called the Atlantic and the Pacific. We're out here in the middle of an ocean, and we're protected by these two giant oceans, so it's hard to get to us. Iran is not in the middle of the ocean, but very well could be, very, very similar. They're protected by mountains, just like we found in Afghanistan. Mountains are a nightmare. So in order to put boots on the ground, you're talking, the old movie 300, going through the hot gates and stuff. Iran is all hot gates. So to send troops in there, you're going to have to airlift those troops in there, and you're going to have to continue to airlift supplies and supplies and supplies and supplies, and makes the Berlin airlift look like daily package at the Smith household. So Iran is a very, very, very difficult place to take over, because it just has those humongous structures, giant mountains. Kushner's father was in prison until Trump became president and freed him. Yeah, so there's been some people say it's an inevitability that we would eventually get in some type of conflict with Iran. Let's see. Drop bombs on a country. Let's see
to
what
that.
else we
Kimberly
got here.
Halkett there in the White House. Well, Iran's response to the US strikes destroying its major nuclear sites is yet to come. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran would consider all possible responses. But hours after the strikes, Iran fired a barrage of missiles into Israel. Bernard Smith reports.
Iranian strikes began within hours of the US joining the conflict. The damage is extensive, with sites in and around Haifa and Tel Aviv being bombed.
We were in the center of Israel, center division of Israel. A missile fire hit right inside of a building complex behind me.
Iran says it also targeted Israel's main airport, Ben Gurion, but there's no evidence that the airport has been hit.
Ben Gurion Airport, the regime's biological research centre and alternative command and control centres, were hit during this wave by guided missiles equipped with manoeuvrable warheads. These were guided until the moment of impact and carried various types of high explosive destructive payloads.
Israel's military says 10 sites were hit by missiles or shrapnel. But despite Iran's retaliation, most Israelis continue to support their government and welcome US involvement.
And I was really happy that, Trump has decided to act, finally. I think it will end the war. This is my hope. Maybe it is wishful thinking, but I hope it will be fine.
Israelis are now braced for more Iranian retaliation and the risk of more destruction. These houses in a neighborhood in central Israel were wiped out by the force of the missile blast. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Donald Trump phoned him immediately after the US finished its bombing of targets in Iran.
He congratulated me, he congratulated our army, he congratulated our people, and I congratulated him, the US pilots and the American people. President Trump is fiercely leading the free world. He's a great friend of Israel, like no one before him.
A church in Warren, Michigan that had an attack today. Let's be careful on this. There was a famous story after the Iraq War or after 9/11. That's another thing. 9/11 happened from people that were predominantly from Saudi Arabia. What do? We go attack Afghanistan and Iraq, so it kind of makes no sense. So anyway, but during that time, there were people in America that were attacked, and they were Sikhs. Technically, they're called, the correct pronunciation is Sikh, but Sikhs. They are not Muslim. They're the ones that wear the turban and the knife and the khakis and all that kind of stuff. Little ceremonial knife type thing as part of their religion. They're not Muslim at all, and they were attacked and killed. And so there's when stuff like this happens, the media, all media, they're trying to get clicks and views and stuff like that. So they report things that later on, within 24, 48 hours, a week later, we find out is not necessarily true. So hopefully, anything like that isn't involved in what we're talking about here. And someone mentioned that, the great Satan. For Iran, for the fundamentalists, yes, the Ayatollah called the United States the great Satan. Actually, Israel was the great Satan, and we were the second great Satan, I guess. But in Islam, Satan is different than in Christianity. In Christianity, Satan is, as we know, the devil and stuff like that. But in Islam, Satan doesn't have all that much power. It just tempts people, kind of like Las Vegas. Las Vegas, is it tempts us. Come on, what happens here comes here. Give us your money and all that. So that's kind of Satan, I guess. It's kind of a crazy comparison. But in Islam, that's what Satan is. It's someone that tempts you from the correct path. So that's what they're saying is, Israel and America, they're not evil necessarily going out there and doing evil, but they get other people to do evil by saying, hey, maybe you should do this and you can, win a lot of money doing this. And so yeah, anytime, people say particular things, we need to make sure we know the context of, what exactly they mean by that particular term. So
now everyone
know
waits
how to
for
respond.
Iran's response. The regime in Tehran hasn't yet followed through on its threats of retaliation against the US, either by targeting US bases or trying to choke off global oil supplies. But that could change. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Amman.
Yeah, I really hate this. I'm sure you all do. When we're talking about this type of situation where, unfortunately, we're going to spend a phenomenal amount of money and hopefully it doesn't escalate and we lose service members. But invariably, people start talking about economics and they start talking about oil and how, Iran has already said they're going to shut off the Strait of Hormuz. And that's where about 20% of the oil passes through every day. Mostly goes to China, South Korea, Japan, that oil. So in those countries, it's going to be expensive. And people say, okay, we don't care. We've got a lot of oil here. Well, when the price of oil in those countries go up, we've got tariffs on them. And now the prices of oil are going to go up. So the prices of everything in our stores are going to go up, which causes inflation in the United States. And maybe the COLA for Social Security, compensates for that, or maybe it doesn't. But even if we've got resources in the United States, oil resources in the United States, do you think ExxonMobil and all those guys are not going to raise the prices of oil in the United States when they can say, okay, wait a second, it's, X amounts on the world market, but, we'll only sell it for, 20% less in America. Do you think they're going to do that? No, they're not going to do that. If it goes up price in all the other parts of the world, they're going to say, well, we could sell it for $80 a barrel in the United States, but we can sell it $100 to China. Of course they're going to sell it to China because, they don't, and that's how we got into this. That's how we got into this issue in the first place is, we tried to take over Iran when they tried to nationalize oil. So we just need to get off oil. The externalities of oil, if gas was actually priced at how much it actually cost us in terms of all the wars and all the protection of the sea lanes, gas should be $10, $15 a gallon. All the subsidies we put into the gas at ExxonMobil and tax breaks and all of that. So we pay $2 or $3, $4 a gallon. If all those externalities, all of those charges outside that bring us that gas, all the wars and protection and all that, then the actual gas itself, rather than paying through taxes, we would just pay for it in the gas itself. Then gas itself would be $10, $15 a gallon. But we pay for it in other ways. Yeah. You're welcome.
Well, the eyes of the world have shifted to Israel's conflict with Iran, but people in Gaza are still being killed there. Attacks at aid distribution sites haven't stopped, and hospitals are still struggling to keep up with the casualties. Hani Mahmoud has this from Gaza City.
Let's
As tension between Israel and Iran dominate headlines across the region.
In just 2 days, and saying it was not open-ended, but warning the Iranians to negotiate.
There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
So peace. So Iran, no response. This is the key. The next few days is what's going to decide it all. Whether we're put into another endless war that is going to cost us trillions of dollars, or we stop here. Or because if Iran does something or one of its proxies do something and American life is lost, then we've got that sunken case, the sunken cost, where we need to go back and retaliate, eye for an eye, and then back and forth, and that's that mission creep. How did we get into World War I? Nobody figures out how we get to war. Oh, they sunk the Lusitania. No, they sunk the Lusitania 2 years before we got into World War I. One day we just kind of mission creep into World War I. So same type of situation, possibly, unfortunately.
Remember,
Hopefully,
there are
hopefully not
many
here.
targets left.
Vice President J.D. Vance says this is not an attack on the Iranian people and not about regime change, and rejected the idea Trump broke the law taking this action.
The idea that this was outside of presidential authority, I think any real...
And these nations to keep global shipping moving, or could we see that part of the world being a pinch point in this crisis?
Well, everyone is asking whether or not the Iranians are going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, or at least interrupt the movement of gas and oil through this strait. That is one source of leverage the Iranians do have, but we do need to keep in mind, though, that this would harm the economic interests of many countries that are friendly to Iran and are very important partners, such as China. And therefore, I think Iran will be careful about whatever moves it takes in the Strait of Hormuz. And also, we need to keep in mind that if the Iranians were to shut down this artery, the U.S. military would certainly get involved, and that is not necessarily a scenario that the Iranians want to find themselves in.
Question about what will China and North Korea? Wow, we never know what Kim will do in North Korea. That's, depends on how he wakes up. But China is a little more easy to understand. President Xi there. When Elon Musk and Doge shut down USAID and, all of the great help that, sure, some of it went to things that you might not agree with, but a vast majority of it went to people, that are sick or are dying, starving and stuff like that and throughout the world. And when we cut that off, we lost an unbelievable amount of good public relations and, helping people. Who jumped in? China. China jumped in. They've been working on this for a long time, trying to improve their kind of, their public relations throughout the country, throughout the world. And they immediately jumped in and they started helping out these a lot of these places. So they're going to get the diplomatic benefit of that. They have gone, China became communist in 1949. Chairman Mao, who was a terrible economic type of guy, he was good. He brought back kind of nationalism to China after Chiang Kai-shek and Sun Yat-sen and all these guys. So he was very good in kind of restoring China's pride in its history. And one of the things it did once it started, being a little bit more advanced economically, so it decided, it got 1.3 billion people. The problem with, China is every time they bring 100 million people to kind of the middle class, they've still got, a few 100 million behind. So it took them a while, but they're doing a lot better. And now they've decided to go out to the world. And what we used to do, Voice of America and all this kind of stuff, we used to go out to the world. China is now doing that in Africa and Asia, and different places, and they are going out there and building roads and railways and helping people throughout the world. So they're getting the humongous publicity for that. So I don't think China is going to do anything. I think they're just going to sit on their hands and take advantage of another, if we get into this, then another, perhaps a decline of America's standing in the world and the increase of our debt. So China, I think, is just going to sit by and kind of take, just watch, see what happens. They're obviously going to be very involved in, making sure in Iran, in relatively good terms with China. China doesn't play political, they play economic. So political wise, they don't care. But in terms of economics, if they can make some money on it, then they will make some money on it. So that's kind of where they're at now.
All right, Giorgio Caffiero, good to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Still ahead on Al Jazeera. Israel kills more than 30 Palestinians in Gaza, and its blockade of fuel puts ambulances out of service in Gaza City.
Think about pulling out itself. And there might be other countries. Egypt, for example, has long been concerned that Israel doesn't face any international monitoring. And Egypt says that's unfair. And so Egypt, if others pulled out, might think that it would be worth their while to pull out. And, there could be other countries around the world similarly fed up with the international nuclear order. Iran has been on the verge, you could say, for several months, even years. They've had this nuclear capability, but they haven't done it. Now there's little reason for them not to do it, that they've been bombed. And so I fully expect Iran to pull out of the NPT, expel the inspectors, launch on a program of a nuclear weapons program with now all the resources of the country devoted to it. They don't have their top nuclear scientists. Israel assassinated 9 of them, but they have enough others who could be brought up to speed and could carry the program forward. And Iran has a critical advantage in this program because, they had produced over 400 kilograms of 60% highly enriched uranium, very close to the 90% needed for nuclear weapons. That 60% HEU, highly enriched uranium, was in cylinders which Iran surely removed before the attack and hid somewhere. So if they still have these cylinders of 60% enriched uranium, they don't have too much further to go to move it up to 90. They've got to build centrifuges, they've got to assemble the centrifuges, but I think they'll be able to do that within a year or so.
Yeah, the kind of the justification, the weapons of mass destruction and nuclear. I've seen some comments in here about that. I don't think anybody wants, Iran to have nuclear weapons. If you ask me, and probably a lot of people in here, I don't think we want any country to have nuclear weapons. That's just, we learned through World War II, that's not something that we can be trusted with, that type of mass destruction. In World War I, when those aerial bombs were first invented, that was a humongous international outcry. When you're on the battlefield and you are fighting, then you see that person. But when you drop bombs from the planes, you don't see those people. So that was a humongous controversy when, aerial bombardment first started. Dresden multiplied even more. But now we've become, that's what you do. You push a button and, Mar-a-Lago and a submarine in the Gulf shoots off a Tomahawk, and that's how we do things nowadays. And it doesn't seem like it's an issue. But to bring the nuclear, card to it, that's, we're talking collateral damage. That's pretty much all collateral damage, that large of an explosion. So I don't think nobody really wants, anybody to have a nuclear weapon. But the issue is if one country does, then I guess you have to have, it's like the old George C. Scott, video with Peter Sellers. I always remember that, always forget the name of that movie. There's no fighting in the war room. So Iran got the uranium out of ahead time and rapidly developed their nuclear missiles, in which case we'd find out the results in 6 months. Yeah. So that's what the issue is. How is this issue going to be used going forward? We destroyed everything, so we're good, so we don't need to do anything. We're done. Iran retaliates and they do whatever, then it restarts again. Or it's, okay, we didn't get everything, they moved it, so there's still a threat, so we needed to do it again. So unfortunately, I think there's several, Dr. Strangelove, thank you, I always forget that. They're trying to suck out our water, our essence, right? Yes, phenomenal movie. Peter Sellers is just unbelievable in Dr. Strangelove. And for being there too, watch Being There. Yeah, that's a good meditation for this time. Watch Peter Sellers and Being There, phenomenal. But yeah, I think there's several steps, and considering that, the leadership, our dear leaders, have, put, Ted Cruz and, the Kushners and MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia, Netanyahu, they have wanted Iran to be gone for a long time, regime change. And yeah, well, so we shall see. But this is why I wanted to do this today, is because all these people need a political will. All these people need support. And if you get informed and you know all sides of the subject, and you can see the indicators before they actually happen, then you can reach out and say, hey, I know what you're going to do. I know your next steps. Don't do it. Don't even think about it. So reach out to your politicians. If you think that's the case, then yes, 100%. So, all right, I'm going to end it here today. Please keep stay informed. I'll go back to my regular regular format tomorrow. I think I'm going to do something on immigration and sanctuary cities, or should we call them sanctuary farms now? And then those people that on my website, let me pull up my website. Those people on my website that did the video question, I'm sorry I didn't get to you today, but yeah, you can definitely. I will definitely get to them tomorrow. So with Social Security, I'm going to go back to answering all your Social Security questions today. But sorry about the kind of change of format, but the war does affect our Social Security. So, and it affects so much more. So let's protect our service members and protect our country and protect our future. All right, y'all take care.